Oklahoma Republican Senator James Lankford is on Capitol Hill. Senator, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
One of your colleagues, Republican Senator John Thune of South Dakota, said Wednesday he thinks the Senate might take a look at the idea of regulating bump stocks. Officials believe the Las Vegas shooter used them to increase his semi-automatic weapon's rate of fire to mimic automatic fire. Is that something that you're willing to take a look at?
I think it's one of the things we need to start by looking at their approval process in 2010 when BATF actually approved the bump stock in 2010. Let's find out why they did it, how they did it, what the background was on that. That was done during the Obama administration. There's a fair question that they did their own research. Let's see what happened during that and then how they're used now.
So
all of those questions are out there to be able to examine the process of that, yes.
And you would be open to perhaps taking a look at regulating those particular devices?
Yeah, we've got to find out the facts and the details first. My biggest issue is let's get all the facts out there. Let's actually discover how they're being used and how the approval process was done. Was everything followed through on that process? And then to be able to determine what needs to be done now.
And the actual devices themselves, though, some supporters of the Second Amendment who would argue that it is their right to have that kind of modification under the law, and that regulating them would not necessarily have prevented someone who was intent on carrying out violence. What would you say to that particular argument?
Well, there are a couple of questions that are there. One is people that use them say it doesn't make their weapon into an automatic weapon. They can pull the trigger one time, hold it down, and it continuously fires rapidly after that. That mimics an automatic weapon, which we as Americans said decades ago that we will not allow for civilian use. So that's already a settled issue in American law. The issue is this an exception in the process? Is this something that needs to be confronted and changed? Those are all questions that are reasonable questions after an event like this, and quite frankly, were reasonable questions in 2010 to be able to ask as well before they even came on the market.
I'd like to turn to the Russia investigation. On Wednesday, Chairman Richard Burr said the Russia investigation had expanded slightly. You're on the Senate Intelligence Committee. Do you think that your investigation will be over anytime soon, by the end of the year? Is there any kind of time frame at all?
We have not set a deadline on when to finish. Our main focus is to be able to continue on the work. We've done over 100 interviews. We've literally gone through 100,000 pages of testimony and of documents that have been gathered. We have 4,000 pages just of transcripts. So there's a lot that has happened so far as we've worked quietly behind the scenes. Our focus is to be diligent through the whole process, because at the end of it, we're going to release out a bipartisan report and say we've looked at all the facts. Because this is a classified investigation, the American people can't see all of it, so we feel an obligation to be extremely thorough as we go through it, release what we can at the end of it, and the rest of it say we have gone diligently through it, have done the interviews and things that have to be done. Here's where we stand.
To follow up, given the facts that you know, as we look ahead to 2018, what concerns you more? Russia's use of social media to cause chaos, or its attempts to target state voting systems?
I think the primary issue is the state voting systems. Obviously, states run their own systems, and that should be protected for states to be able to do it. But states shouldn't have to be an island trying to be able to take on a Russian group trying to basically attack their system. So we've got to find a way to be able to, as a federal government, be able to help protect the states, but still allow the states to be able to do their own voting systems to be able to operate as they choose to. The issue of Russians engaging in social media and trying to influence, it's typically what they're doing is they're trying to find where Americans are already arguing, and they try to bump up the volume on that. So trying to expose what they're doing and how they're doing it, I think, is extremely important so Americans can discern what's outside interference and what's Americans actually doing what Americans do, and that's arguing about different policy issues. It's okay for us to argue about it. It's not okay for a foreign government to step in and to try to encourage that.
I'd like to ask you about illegal immigration. It's been about a month since President Trump gave Congress a 6-month deadline to come up with legislation to protect so-called dreamers who were brought into the United States illegally as children. You and Senator Thom Tillis introduced a new bill called the Succeed Act. Why is your bill a better solution than the bipartisan DREAM Act?
So the DREAM Act has actually come before Congress 3 different times over the past 10 years. It's failed every single time. It even failed when there was a Democrat president, Democrat House, and a Democrat Senate. I don't believe the DREAM Act will ever be the final answer for how we're going to deal with DACA, because it just not been able to succeed. It takes up so much beyond just the individuals that are in the DACA program. So, Senator Tillis and I wanted to be able to look at what is a solution here that listens to all voices, both voices that are very passionate about making sure individuals that come into the country earn their ability to be able to stay here, and then not putting anyone ahead of anyone else in line that actually does it the right way, but also understanding these children that came didn't come voluntarily. They came with parents. The parents violated the law. The children were coming with their parents. And the basic principle is we don't, in American law, hold children accountable for the actions of their parents. So we need to have some compassion in the process and to be able to resolve this issue for these kids especially, but we need to be able to do it in a way that also honors the law. That doesn't seem like an unreasonable request, and that's what we're trying to be able to do with the Succeed Act.
There has been criticism of the Succeed Act from the right and the left, and I'd like to ask you about that. How would you respond to conservative critics who would argue that the Succeed Act actually offers amnesty to undocumented immigrants? What are the specific ways in which those undocumented immigrants would have to earn the right to U.S. citizenship?
So the first thing that I tell people is amnesty is what we have right now, where the federal government is looking the other way, and we know we have 12 million people in the country that are not here legal, and no one's doing anything about it. That's what amnesty really looks like. So for me, the next process is how do we resolve this long term? There's not going to be a mass deportation of 12 million people. That's not going to happen, and most certainly not these individuals that grew up in the country, that came at 6 months old, that have never been back to a home country, that have grown up here. Many of them didn't even know they weren't American citizens until they were in high school trying to get into college, and they suddenly discovered they can't do that. So we have to be able to resolve that issue. So what we do to be able to earn their ability to be able to stay here is that we take those individuals that came into the country before 2012. They have to have a certain age criteria. They have to be working, going to school, joining the military. They can have no criminal record. They can apply and get a conditional residency for 5 years. Again, they have to show they have no criminal record during that 5-year time period. Work, go to school, join the military. They can then renew that for 5 years. That allows them to again be able to show that opportunity and their willingness to be able to engage in the process. At the end of that, they can then apply for a green card. That is a 15-year process that they go through to literally earn their ability to be able to stay here in the country step by step, but it allows them to be able to work, go to school, travel, join the military, all the basic things that they really want to be able to do, but it takes them a 15-year process to be able to go through the full journey for them towards naturalization.
Debate that will no doubt continue. Senator James Lankford, thanks so much, Senator.